Got a good intro. All right. It's Chris Striegel, your favorite intro host of the Life and Stride podcast. This is episode 93. We have a very special guest, Brady Holmer, on the pod. I have a little icebreaker story, though, before we start. So I'm in the locker room at work changing for my second run. Ran 8.5 miles this morning, did a little 6.5 mile double at lunch, and met up with some guys on my lunch break in the locker room. And the CEO of my company walks in. Won't name him just in case he's a huge fan of the pod. But trust me, he's not.
Chris works for Rawlings.
We won't go any further than that. Anyway, so out of his pocket falls a can of like cinnamon Zin, and so he's like leaving the locker room, and then I said, "Enjoy your trip to Zimbabwe," and it went like right over his head. Just like he was just like what? And then I was like, just forget it. So yeah, I was trying to make a big impression on the CEO today. Epic failure. So never getting promoted again.
Yeah, that's a tough look. That's a tough look.
Yeah,
Greg, you've been promoted like 4 times in 2024, have you not?
just twice, but maybe 2025. TBD.
Well, everything
And
Scotty says, take 20% off the top at least.
Well, the cool thing is I'm the CEO of the Life and Stride podcast, so that's all that really matters.
Yes.
Anyway, all right, enough about me. We have Brady Holmer on the pod. Brady, how's it going, man?
It's going good. I am excited to be here, and I appreciate you referring to me as a very special guest. Makes me feel warm and cozy.
Dude, you are, because I was just saying before the pod, so Brady ran at Northern Kentucky University, and I ran at Bellarmine, so we had some races together at the UK indoor meet in college, probably a couple outdoor meets too. I'm sure cross as well. I'm sure Bellarmine and NKU were at a couple meets. So yeah, I think actually NKU was D2 and in Bellarmine's conference at some point, and then they went D1.
The year that I started running there, that was their first year in Division One. So I don't know, I can't remember what conference Bellarmine was in, but when I was a freshman, we went to the ASUN conference, which made zero sense. For Northern Kentucky, I think we were the most northern team in that conference by like several 100 miles. Like I think Tennessee, maybe somewhere in Memphis or Nashville, was like the next most northern school. So we were racing against all these schools in Florida and Georgia, which was kind of nice because we got to go to Florida twice a year for conference for track and outdoor cross. So that was great, getting to escape the Midwest for a little bit. But yeah, it was fun. So I always say I'm a Division I athlete, but then people ask you where you went. You're like, you ever heard of NKU? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, that's all right. We're pretty good. Our basketball team kind of put us on the map in the last few years.
Yes.
They made the tournament a few times. So
Yeah.
that was cool. But yeah, I was proud it was a great place to run. I think for me, Division I kind of budget, Division I travel, without the Division I stress. So it was great. I'm sure you experienced something similar in Bellarmine.
Yeah. So I went to Louisville for a year, and I just absolutely hated it. It was just way too, well, the classrooms were too big for me. I couldn't focus, but also just, too business-like. It wasn't fun anymore. So went to Bellarmine, very fun vibes. Obviously, much less budget. Had to buy my own shoes, but besides that, it was all good. So I'd love to talk about a recent race result. You just ran Indy Monumental, didn't you?
I did, yeah, 2:26:28.
Was
Let's
that
go.
a PR?
Yeah, that was over a 10-minute PR. I ran 2:37 in May, and with all the caveats, in May I wasn't necessarily that race. I didn't certainly run to my potential, but it's still cool to say I PR'd by 10 minutes. It was a very hilly course. It was the Cincinnati Flying Pig Marathon, which has 1,000 feet, I think, of elevation gain. I was doing half the mileage that I did for Indy, but that was kind of an experiment. It was actually my first marathon really ever that I trained for. So Indy was actually the first one where I thought I was actually racing to my potential. But yeah, I was super stoked with that. The goal was actually 2:28, and then it ended up being mid 2:26. So I was thrilled with that.
Did our boy Danny P here ran a PR there too after he ran Chicago, and it was a bit of a warm day. It was a perfect day in Indy, it looked like. I was on vacation that week. I would have doubled back too because I didn't run when I went in Chicago as well. But jealous of you boys.
Yeah, the weather was good. I mean, you can't really get better than like 50 kind of. I think it was even 45, mid 45s at the start, and then like 50 near the end. Not super windy, which was great. Like you never know what to expect. Coming, having lived in the Midwest and stuff, you're always like, Indiana, it could be just like wind gusts and all that crap. But the weather was honestly perfect.
Yeah, they actually pushed the race back a week or so because the Taylor Swift concert was coming into town. I read somewhere that Taylor Swift brought in with her 3-day show, like brought in something like $1 billion to the city of Indianapolis in the area. It's like nuts. But thank you, T Sweezy, for giving us some good weather at Indy.
Well, they actually shifted Taylor's show to be a week earlier because I was coming into town for Indy.
Oh, yes.
So they called her up and they said, "Hey, listen, Brady's making his marathon debut. We're gonna have to switch your concert up a little bit."
Brady's going for a
she was cool
10-minute PR.
Yeah, this is very important.
So Brady, I found your Twitter recently and reached out to you to come on the pod. I read like 4 of your tweets and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love the stuff that Brady's putting out. He's like I would describe Brady, and check him out on X, formerly known as Twitter. His handle is B_Holmer. And I would describe Brady's like Twitter presence as a millennial Steve Magnus. And you can push back on that by all means. But
yeah, what do you think of that?
The quality, yeah. What do you think of that?
So I guess I would kind of agree. So Steve and I are like, I mean, we're buddies, kind of. I've never met him, but like we're buddies on X and stuff. I'm a little less cynical than him, I think I would say.
I would
He tends to really just kind of be, especially recently. And again, I'm not trying to talk bad about Steve, but he just tends to be like, if he sees anything that like an influencer posts or something, he's going to like dig it and try to tell you why like this isn't right. I tend to be a little more, I think, open-minded in that way. I also haven't moved over to Blue Sky yet, so me and him have a few differences there. But sure, yeah. I'll take that. I think that's fair enough to say regarding the kind of content we share. But it's funny because Steve was one of the first guys I started reading when I was getting into like exercise science when I was in undergrad. So I decided to major in exercise science and I started learning about it and everything. And I actually bought his book, The Science of Running, which was the first book that he ever wrote. So he was like really my introduction into physiology, running science, exercise science. So I always he's kind of near and dear to my heart, I guess, in that way. Because when I started learning all this stuff, I was really into that. I think I have the book sitting over there on my shelf somewhere. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I just say that comparison because the quality of your content that you put out is really good and it's always really interesting stuff. So kudos on that. But yeah, Steve definitely has kind of the maybe like Gen X, like the running influencer wasn't a thing when he was coming up through the sport and maybe like is a little salty about it. I don't know. We're not psychoanalyzing Steve right now. I like Steve a lot. But
that's round
Brady,
2 of the podcast. Our psychoanalysis of Steve Magnus. We'll do that on round 2.
That's part 2. So you have a master's in human performance. Was reading Steve's book like part of the reason, or were you just obsessed with running and the science behind it?
No, I wouldn't say that was the reason. I started reading his book and stuff a long time ago, like I said, when I started doing undergrad. And then once I graduated with my exercise science degree, I decided to go to grad school. And so I actually went to grad school at the University of Florida, and that's where I got my human performance degree. Obviously still followed like some of Steve's content and writing there, but I have, other kind of influences as well. And that kind of got me into it, and then the writing aspect of it too, which is something I've been into recently. I look to guys like Alex Hutchinson and his book Endure. So that those people have kind of been inspirations, but no, I think the motivation for going for that degree was just, when I started studying exercise science, I just got really into all of this stuff, and it was all I was ever really interested in. I think I was one of the few people who like never really changed their major. I kind of knew what I wanted to do from the start and just really fell in love with it. And then with an exercise science degree, it's funny, there's not really much you can do with it. You can be like a clinical exercise physiologist at a hospital, but kind of the route from there is like you go to grad school, you get a master's or a PhD, and you do research, and you kind of move on from there. So grad school is kind of the logical next step from there, and that's why I decided to do the human performance degree, which in reality is similar to kind of exercise science. I know it sounds a little fancier, and it kind of has a cool name, being like a human performance degree, but it kind of encompasses all things like strength and conditioning, physiology, stuff like that.
Good. That's a good explainer because I honestly didn't know what that entailed, and it's just so broad. So, but I went through your Twitter and I made a list of a bunch of questions, but I think we should ask some other questions first.
Okay.
Well,
And Scotty, let's take a hard right turn. You're on mute, bro.
rookie.
I'm literally writing them. I've been having them done. Dude, ask one question, give me 2 minutes, and I'm ready.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to know, it begs the question. So what do you do now for work?
Yeah, so right now, I haven't necessarily publicly talked about who I work for, so I'm not really going to like talk about that, but I basically work as like my title is a narrative science lead. So I work for a podcast. I do podcast content creation. I help with like doing research, doing an email newsletter and things like that. So that's currently what I'm doing in addition to writing Substack, which is kind of my own thing. I have a weekly newsletter that I write, and then I do some other kind of like contract freelance work on the side. Essentially what I would describe what I do now is like science research / communication type of stuff, broadly.
Would it be fair to say you're like doing what you're, I mean, obviously it's like what you're passionate about, but is like, would you say this is like your dream setup, like career wise for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds like cliche, but it really is. I mean, if I wasn't, what I do with the Substack is sort of a hobby. Like it's not a full-time job. And so essentially what I'm doing with this podcast and who I'm working for now is sort of what I would do in my free time. So yeah, I would say it's kind of the dream scenario. I work remote. I have a lot of flexibility. And I just get to read and write about science all day, which is great.
And you're in Austin now, right?
Yeah, correct.
Originally from Cincinnati?
Yeah, Cincinnati, and then, school at NKU, but kind of still lived in Cincinnati. They're 30 minutes away. And then moved to Gainesville, Florida, lived there for 6 or 7 years, met my wife there, and then we moved here to Austin, Texas. She works for Flow Sports, Flow Track, so they're based here in Austin.
Whoa, cool. What does she do for Flow Track?
She is in like media rights, contracts, stuff like that. She'll tell me what I just said was like completely wrong and butchered what she does, but that's
Sounds
my interpretation
fancy.
of it. Yeah.
Is she a lawyer?
She's not, no.
I want to know, is running in the humidity in Gainesville, Florida or Austin, Texas worse peak summer?
Oh, Austin. Hands
Really?
down. It's not even close,
Oh.
yeah.
Huh, that surprises me. I thought you were going to say Florida.
I've got some family in Gainesville. It's a good spot.
It is. It's a fun town. Like I miss it a lot. It's never a place where I really imagined I would raise a family and like live for the rest of my life. But after leaving there, I certainly miss it. It's a very, close knit like college town, and hopefully we get to go back there soon. I think we're planning to go back in December. My brother still lives there, so we have a reason to visit.
Perfect. Scotty, it's all you.
I'm very sorry, Brady. I'm normally prepared, but my brother came over and I put my kids to bed. Like literally, I ran upstairs to turn my computer on. It's the way it goes sometimes.
That's all right. I did the same thing today, but I didn't have questions to prepare. I just had to sit down and answer.
These are not like something that requires you to be paid like you do for like content creation for a podcast. You'll see in a second, but
all right.
Rapid fires are something that we created a long, long time ago. I don't know why we created it, but we did. And I ask ridiculous questions that I come up with in my head, sometimes ChatGPT, but I've been making them up in my head recently, which is honestly worse. But I ask them and you answer them in a in like most succinct you can without elaborating. Okay?
Okay.
I start and end with the first same two questions, and I have a fun difference. I don't know where this is going to go, and Danny and Streak don't know about this yet. But there's trivia in the middle of this, and I'm doing it. Well, we'll talk about this later.
God.
I'm going to get Google ready. I'm just kidding.
No cheating.
Okay.
If you get them all right, I know you cheated. All right. What is the flavor of ice cream that suits your personality the most?
Nice.
You all might not be familiar with Grater's ice cream, but it's
dude.
Heck yeah,
Oh,
dude.
Grater's
they
is the
are.
spot.
They're familiar with Grater's. Okay. I'm going to go with black raspberry chip.
That's the best flavor to have.
Here's my reasoning. A little bit fruity sometimes, but bold, dark chocolate chips are like, you have a little speckled of those dark chocolate chips in there, which are the strong, bold aspects of my personality. The masculinity, I guess.
Honestly, I like you so much more now, bro. Like, you're up here, bro. Barbie or Oppenheimer?
Oppenheimer. I didn't say
Wicked or
Barbie.
Gladiator?
Wicked. But I've not seen either yet.
If you got arrested tonight, what would your family assume you did?
EPO.
What is your go-to track workout?
Mile repeats.
Oof. What pace?
520. That pace on the track, it's not hard. It doesn't feel unsustainable, but it's just hard enough that it feels great. 515
How many
to
of them?
520. 6.
6 mile
With
repeat.
a 400-meter jog in between.
I like that. I might do that in the morning.
Scotty, I'm doing 6 mile tomorrow morning if you want.
Hell yeah.
What pace?
Threshold 520, 530.
Dude, I'm in.
You keen? All right.
Dude, I'm so in. And we'll say in the name of Brady at the end of every rep.
All right.
I'll feel it each time.
We'll text you after each rep at 5 a.m.
Sweet. I want all the splits.
If you had to run a 100 miler tomorrow, would you rather it be 15,000 feet of vertical downhill the whole time, no ups, or 50,000 feet uphill with no downs?
Uphill with no downs.
Yikes. Okay, I'm inserting 6 trivia questions. I don't know why I did this, but I'm in charge here, and I don't really have to ask for permission. So I'm asking the same 6 trivia questions to our next, 10 guests, and then whoever gets the most right, I'm going to buy them and send them something in a month.
Now it's a competition.
Yeah,
Cool.
it is.
I like this.
All right, 6 trivia questions, and you might get none of them right because I didn't know any of them, but you're a smart guy. What color is a polar bear's skin?
Pink.
Wrong. In which state is it illegal to hunt camels? I'll give you a hint. There's only a couple states where there would be camels.
Yeah, okay. Wyoming.
Wrong. How many
Give us the right answer.
at the end?
Okay.
Okay.
Actually, I'll give it now. First answer was black.
Okay. I should have known that one.
Second answer is Arizona. How many legs does a lobster have?
6.
10.
Dude.
These
Fake
are tough,
news.
man.
What's orange and sounds like a parrot?
You said what is orange and sounds like a parrot? An orange parrot?
A carrot.
Oh my
What-
god.
What's the only mammal capable of true flight?
A bat.
Yes.
Dude, nice.
Ooh,
Sorry about
nice.
that sound clapping. That probably won't be great for the mic, but
1 for 5, bro. Of the hardest trivia questions on the planet.
it's
In
pretty
what
good.
year was the first iPhone released?
2007.
That's it, right?
That's it.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
Sweet.
Dude, let's go.
On a roll now.
All right, 2 for 6. I feel like you probably got more than whoever else is going to answer those poor questions. I'm so sorry. Let's continue. If you could know if you would be super sick the day before a race, would you want to know?
Yeah. I like being prepared.
What would you die in first? A 200-degree sauna or a 40-degree cold plunge?
Oh, the cold plunge.
You're the first person to say that. I've asked a lot of people that this week. I don't know why. It's on my mind. What would happen if Pinocchio said, "My nose is going to grow"?
It would not grow.
What is your favorite color of paint for a wall?
Like a, I don't know what the color would be, like a moss green.
Oh, I'm a big
Oh.
green guy.
Yeah, it's very calming.
All right, this is the last question. I ask everybody this question. Why do you run? You can elaborate.
I don't know. I feel like my reason is because I like need to. I don't feel like I've never really gotten much enjoyment out of any other kind of like exercise or sport. I mean, I like playing sports, but not in the same way that it like scratches that itch that you like, oh, I need to do this today. So, I mean, there are several reasons why I do it, but I think the main one would honestly be, yeah, I enjoy it, but like, I don't know, I have to, I guess that's my answer.
I would agree with that. I feel like, yeah, it's a great answer. I think a lot of our guests have like similar answers, like kind of around that, like I have to, I don't like who I would be if I didn't run, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's a great answer. All right, Danny P. Let's hear your questions, man.
Yeah, I have questions, and these are based off things that you've tweeted about. So I know you're ready.
I'm really excited about number one because I was discussing this on my run today with the guys I run with at lunch.
Creatine.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the deal with creatine for runners? I always knew creatine as something that bodybuilders took. And if you're not in the gym lifting heavy weights and trying to get buffed, then like creatine's useless otherwise. But a lot of runners are taking it now. Why?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right about it being kind of a traditionally a strength training guys or girls supplement or whatever. And that's mainly because I think just that's where a lot of like the research on creatine was. It helps you train harder and therefore it helps you get bigger. And I guess before I say why it might be good for runners, I think that's kind of the common misconception about creatine is that like you just take it and you get big. Well, that's not really the case. Like it's not protein. Like you don't build muscle with creatine. It allows you to train harder and then you can get stronger and you can get bigger. So it's kind of like a training aid. It's like caffeine. You know, you're not going to take caffeine and get better at exercise. You have to like actually train with caffeine. So it's kind of like a tool.
So what's it do?
Yeah. So creatine, I guess without going into like an hour-long biochemistry lesson. So our body, you know, it produces ATP is kind of like the energy source of our body or our energy currency that we use. So creatine, we have a system in our body called the creatine phosphate system. And that is it's one of the systems that our body can use to produce ATP. So creatine is bound to a phosphate. And when those break apart, that phosphate, that free phosphate is like a high energy and it can be used to produce adenosine triphosphate, so ATP. So creatine sort of donates the phosphate. And so we have stores of creatine in our body, stored in our muscle, stored in our brain. So our body produces it naturally to use in kind of this energy production pathway. So supplementing with it essentially allows you to saturate your muscle stores. So if you don't eat maybe a lot of meat or a ton of creatine in your diet, supplementing can allow you to just store more in your muscle. And then again, in theory, that just allows you to produce more energy while you're working out, especially for high intensity lifting, sprinting, things like that, just to have more of those energy reserves available, essentially. So you're literally increasing kind of the amount of body energy that your body's able to produce during exercise. So that's what it does. So you supplement with it, you just store more of it in your body. And so then why it might be good for distance runners? There's not a lot of research there. So it's kind of like, why might this work in theory? But it's more than like a theory because it just makes sense like physiologically, I guess. But I mean, for distance runners, a few reasons, and maybe most of these are the reasons that I take it. So I'll kind of talk about it from that aspect. But just the energy standpoint. So you have more creatine. You could just produce more energy. So people will often say like you only use that creatine phosphate system if you're sprinting or lifting something very heavy, but you're kind of using the system all the time to replenish your energy. So you're burning fat, you're burning carbohydrates, and then you're also using that creatine system. So just allows you to have maybe more energy, train harder, run harder. Also perhaps recover faster. Again, just kind of energy replenishment and things like that. Also from the standpoint of bone health, there could potentially be kind of a benefit there. Our bones use ATP to remodel, to get stronger, to be able to get stronger to recover after workouts. And so creatine could also kind of help with that. That's kind of another theory. And then there's some evidence for like it might be good for brain health. Not necessarily sure if you're not old or if you don't have some sort of brain disease or brain injury, it might not be as beneficial. But it's at least interesting to look at in that regard. But I think all distance runners could and should be taking it. There's not really a downside to it. I mean, it can really only help. You may experience some GI distress when you start taking it initially. Some people claim that they start to retain a little bit more water, so they'll gain some weight when they take it. I didn't necessarily experience that, and I switched brands of creatine. I tended to like feel like I was gaining some weight using another brand, and then I switched over, and I don't feel like that anymore. So that's not really as big of a deal, but I feel like good taking it, and I don't know directly, if it's improving my performance, but there seem to be no downsides. It's very cheap, and it can probably, might let you train harder. So I think all distance runners could probably benefit from it somehow, or at least should try.
Yeah, I love that. Great explanation. Very thorough. Thank you for that. How do you supplement with it, like on the day to day, or maybe around in a race?
Yeah, so with creatine, it's not like something like caffeine. So basically, you just start taking it and you take it forever. You just take it once a day, every single day. And you never, I mean, you can go off it for a couple days and it doesn't have an effect, but it's not something that you say, take an hour before my workout so it will benefit my workout. Because again, the only reason it works is because your muscles become saturated with it after you supplement with it. So it's like supplementing with a vitamin. If you're deficient and you supplement with a vitamin, your levels go up, and then you don't perform as bad. So creatine's the same way. You take it for a few weeks to a month, then your stores are saturated, and that's probably when you'll start to see the benefits. And so how you take it is just it comes in like a scoop. So it's creatine monohydrate, just like a scoop. It's like a white powder. TSA might sometimes confuse it with like drugs if you're trying to take it on a plane or something like that. So label your bag creatine, and they won't ask any questions. Or disguise your Coke as creatine, I guess you can do that too. No, not advice. So yeah, you can mix it in water. It doesn't really dissolve very well. What I do, I pretty much do like a smoothie every morning after my workout. So I'll blend the creatine up in my smoothie. It blends very well, and I just take it that way. But you could dry scoop it into your mouth, I guess, if you wanted to do that. You could mix it in like yogurt, but you could just like swirl it around in some water or coffee and drink it that way too. But yeah, you just take like 5 grams a day, 5 to 10 grams a day, and just do it every day. Pretty easy.
Striegel, are you going to get on the creatine?
I think he just told me. Yeah, I've
already ordered it.
Did you really?
No, but I want to literally while he's talking. I'm in.
Yeah, I'm sold. Brady, I've tried several different, totally legal, like stuff. I've tried beta alanine. I've tried, and all pill form, L-carnitine, and there's a supplement called Whole Package. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like got freeze dried bull testicle and blood and stuff. I know a pro runner that whose team takes it. I won't name him. It's totally legal, but yeah, you're supposed to take like 6 a day. It was very expensive. That's why I stopped taking that. But yeah, I've tried.
Have you noticed any benefits with like beta alanine or L-carnitine?
I feel like I lost weight on L-carnitine. Beta alanine, not really. I think you have to take that for like quite a while for it to have a effect. But I feel like I lost weight on L-carnitine in college for sure. That's what I heard about that.
That kind of makes sense. It's somewhat of like a stimulant, and it would increase like your fat burning. So I could see maybe why it would cause you to lose weight. I mean, I haven't heard like a ton, but that in theory, I guess that could happen.
Yeah, that was my lightest I have been, certainly. But yeah, beta alanine, I think, like I said, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have to take that for an extended period of time for that to have a benefit. But
yeah, I think that's one of those that you can kind of take acutely, but you can supplement it with like every day. I mean, it's like an amino acid, I guess, but I haven't read a ton of the research on it. I guess for beta alanine, the research that I am aware of, it tends to only really benefit very high intensity like performance. So maybe you just didn't see the benefits as like an endurance runner. That's kind of where I would
okay,
probably
so like
see what's going on.
Your mid-D sprinters. Okay, well that makes more sense.
Yeah, 800 meters and below, maybe.
How long have you been taking creatine?
Several months now, probably almost 6 months now.
When did you notice like a result? Was it immediately, or does it take a bit?
Again, I think it's hard to kind of say because I tend to do a lot of things like at the same time, unfortunately. So you can't really directly attribute it to creatine. But if you were to take it, I would say, you're probably not going to notice anything for at least 2 weeks, and then probably like a month at least before you start to see benefits. I think the benefit, if I had to like pinpoint maybe where did I see like one major benefit was just this training block, my recovery capacity just seemed to be much better than it has in the past. And it could be a bunch of that, I trained a little bit more in super shoes. So that could obviously be, it could be attributed to that a little bit. But I just think that like I was bouncing back from workouts and stuff a lot better. And I attribute at least some of that to creatine, I think.
It's cool. And you do it after the work, like any run, right?
Yeah, I just do it because I take it every day. So I basically just take it in my smoothie after a run. I think ideally it's best to take it after exercise. I've heard some stuff about basically exercise causes your body to uptake it better than if you hadn't exercised beforehand. So that's kind of my theory behind that. So I take it right immediately or as close to exercise as possible.
Cool.
Makes sense. So there's a lot of hype around ketones right now in running and endurance. I think it started in the cycling world. I think some of like the Tour de France riders were taking ketones before it was cool, and now you have these nifty ketone shots like Ketone IQ and ketones, right? They're everywhere. I think I saw you had a post where you take them post exercise. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been taking them for recovery, and this is kind of based on like some of the research. You're right about, I think it all started in like the cycling world, and then there were a few studies showing if you did really long duration, like 3-hour exercise and took ketones, it could potentially help at the very end if you were doing a sprint or something like that. A lot of that hasn't really like panned out. I haven't really seen any research lately that shows that if you take them before exercise, they help during. So like they don't improve performance per se. I've taken them before exercise a couple times. I notice some sort of a benefit, but it tends to be more like the mental than the physical. I don't think that they have like a glycogen sparing effect or anything like that during exercise. So I don't necessarily take them for that. But yeah, I take them afterwards. Some of the research suggesting they could help promote recovery. So I like started taking them after harder workouts, like my long runs, and my weekly speed workout, just to maybe help replenish glycogen a little bit, muscle protein synthesis. So that's kind of the theory as to why I take those. And I keep saying theory, but some of this is based in evidence, but it's not like these definitively show, this is going to help with your recovery. And then there was a study a few years ago, I think, maybe more than a few now, but basically they did like an overtraining study. So they took a group of cyclists, they put them through this very rigorous like training, basically designed to make them overtrain, like have overtraining symptoms. And when they took ketones, basically they didn't have any of these symptoms. So they didn't have any overtraining symptoms. And so for me, I'm like, well, it could help mitigate potentially the chance that I'm overreaching or overtraining if you're doing high mileage, lots of training, lots of life stress and things like that. So I don't take them every day. They're still kind of expensive for me to take like one every single day, but twice a week is kind of affordable. They're like, I don't know what, $7-8 a serving. So, it's like $15 a week, which isn't too bad. I can justify that. But a whole pack a week, not necessarily. It's a little bit much for my budget.
Yeah, our boy Jacob Thompson, he's sponsored by Ketone IQ.
Nice.
And he gave me like a whole water bottle of it. Like, I guess they sell it in that way. It's like $100 water bottle. And yeah, I take it every now and then before workout or long run. But now I'm learning maybe after makes more sense. But I can't.
I mean, if you're not experiencing any like side effects during the run and you think that they might help, I think that there's a reason to use them. I think like for the cognitive benefit, especially with Ketone IQ, that's kind of where that form of the ketone has been more well researched. I just took one. So they have a new one that just came out. It's it has only 5 grams of ketones, which is like half of the strong one kind of that you were taking from the water bottle per serving, and has 100 milligrams of caffeine. So I popped one of those before I did like an 18-mile long run last weekend. And I don't know, I just felt the whole time like I could have kept going. I had like high levels of motivation. So I'm going to keep trying that. That's something I'm interested in. It could have been the extra caffeine, but I think there's something to say about the ketones there. So I wouldn't necessarily cut them out during a workout. I think it's all about experimenting with them and seeing if you like them. I also, maybe I'll see if the guys over there can like send you all some.
Oh, do you got a ketone plug?
I got a plug.
Nice. Dude, They need to figure out the taste. I need some flavoring or something with the taste.
Dude,
The
they
taste-
did.
They got. Do you like green apple or peach?
the ones you have your plugs got
The
taste ones.
caffeine ones have flavor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
Wyatt Moss gave me one before. Dude, I ripped one at the Shakeout at Chicago, and I was taking it with Floberg was like right next to me, and he was like, "Why on earth are you taking a ketone shot right now?" He was like, "Have you ever done that before?" I was like, "No." He was like, "Why are you doing this the day before an A race?" I was like,
Oh my
"I don't know."
god. Yeah.
Hey, you PR man. Maybe that's it.
It works. Yeah.
It was a rough day.
Yeah, the one. Okay,
But
so the ketones I
it
have
tastes
are not
terrible.
flavored. Yeah.
No. The unflavored ones taste pretty terrible. You just got to think of it as like medicine. It's not something you know.
Yeah.
You don't sit there and sip it like a cocktail or something.
I got
Yeah.
a question
Down the hatch.
got a question about carbs. The only research, I'm not going to embarrass myself. I'm just going to let you tell me what your opinion is, because you obviously have done more research on this stuff. But the only opinion that I've heard is from a Nick Bear podcast, like forever ago. Something about like simply put, if you eat a piece of bread, like it doesn't turn into glycogen for 24 hours. What's your
Well-
like? How, in your opinion, how does, or maybe it's not opinion actually, but how does that work? How does the world of carb to glycogen work? And
Yeah, well, it certainly takes time. I mean, I couldn't give you like a time frame as to when, you know, between that bread going in your mouth and it going into muscle glycogen. It certainly takes some time. I mean, you know, you have to digest it, then it turns into blood glucose, then your body stores it as glycogen. But the context is obviously going to be important there. I mean, it's all going to depend on what your glycogen stores are when you're eating that bread. So, I mean, if you eat that piece of bread and you're 10 minutes after your marathon, that's probably going to turn into muscle glycogen fairly quickly. Whereas, you know, if you eat the bread and you just had Thanksgiving dinner 2 hours ago, then it's probably just going to turn into blood glucose and stay in your system. So, I mean, it's all about, you know, have you eaten? Have you just exercised? So context certainly matters there. But again, I don't know. Yeah, it takes some time. I mean, you don't eat something and it's like, boom, into my muscle glycogen. But if your muscles are hungry enough, again, like if you're very glycogen depleted, then it will get there quicker than if you weren't.
interesting. So, like for a carb load for a race, like some people do like a super heavy 3-day carb load. You know, does it reach a certain point where it's like null, like, and it's just useless? You might as well just stop.
Yeah, somebody was asking me about the carb load, and it's interesting. I mean, there's I think some decent research on carb loading, but as far as I know, like the extent of my knowledge is for a carb load kind of to actually work. So what's the point of a carb load? It's to saturate, you know, get as much glycogen into your muscle as possible and your liver. So you store glycogen in your muscles and in your liver. Well, for most of the time, you know, if you go for a run and then you eat adequate carbs for the next day, you're pretty much going to replenish your muscle glycogen stores by the next day, regardless of whether you think about whether you're carb loading or not. So the idea behind a carb load is somehow, I need to get more carbohydrates into my muscle glycogen or into my liver and into my muscles as possible. Well, if you eat more, you only have a limited stores. So if you just eat more carbohydrates, like you said, Scott, there's a limit where your body's just like, well, we can't really store anymore. So the theory behind the carb load is you actually do a very low carb diet for, say, maybe you're 10 days out from your race. You're going to restrict carbs for 3 to 4 days, deplete, and then do your regular training. And then you're going to up your carb intake, you know, maybe twice as much as it normally would be. And then you're going to quote unquote super saturate your muscle stores because they've been depleted. And the theory is like somehow then when you reintroduce carbs, they store more than you normally would. I think there's some evidence to indicate that happens. But again, the way that most people carb load isn't by doing that. So I think that the whole idea of carb loading and the way that most people do it isn't necessarily doing anything. I mean, I can't say that I really carb load. I didn't really carb load before Indy. I mean, I kind of elevate my ratio of carbs to protein and fats and stuff the few days before the race, but I don't do anything insane like, you know, go on 90% carbohydrate diet. I just eat a little more than normal. You're training less already. So even if you ate the same amount of carbs, you're probably going to have more muscle glycogen because you're tapering. You dropped your volume like 50% that week. So assuming you continue to eat the same amount. But yeah, so in order to have that like super saturating effect, to my knowledge, you have to do kind of that depletion period beforehand. So not to say you got to go keto or something like that, but you're going to definitely eat like a lower carbohydrate diet for 3 to 4 days, and then for a week, maybe eat, do your traditional carbohydrate load.
Dude, I can see why you have a following on socials because you are, I mean, I'm learning so much. We're only been on 40 minutes and I don't know. I'm learning a lot from you. This is crazy. And I feel like you just know infinite more things too. That would be super helpful to my running that I haven't even thought of.
Well, ask away, I'm always, you can always ask me offline too if you have other questions.
I got one.
Yeah.
So you created a guide to aerobic fitness and VO2 max essentials. What's in the guide? Like what's in the book of secrets? How do we all run marathon PRs every time we go out?
It's a Jack Daniels rival.
Not quite. Maybe a version 2 of it. So this book, the VO2 Max Essentials, it was kind of, I did like a series of blog posts on VO2 Max, and then I just decided, hell, like let's turn this into an ebook. So it's not, it's not my magnum opus, like my life's work or whatever. I think, I have a better book.
We love that term on this podcast.
Great. I'm glad I could use it.
Yeah,
I think it's the first time I've ever used that phrase in my life. So
Parker Stinson dropped that on us and we were mind blown. So we say it a lot.
Cool. So, and I mean, I do plan to write like a second version of that. That's kind of a better synthesis. But essentially in the book, I kind of go into the science of VO2 max. I have to say the book is less about how to improve your VO2 max. There's certainly a section on it discussing like high intensity intervals and things like that. But a lot of it was around what happens to VO2 max as you age, what are kind of the components of VO2 max, how trainable is it, the associations of VO2 max with longevity, all kinds of stuff like that. So kind of exploring the science behind it rather than how to improve it. But I certainly have some protocols in there, some tables of like, where you are based on your VO2 max, like where it should be, how to improve it and stuff like that. But I got to say it's a lot less of like the secrets, and why I say I want to write a second one is because since then there's been a lot of studies that I've read on like, this ideal kind of training methods if you just want to target your VO2 max that I think will make the second version a lot better with like kind of some actionable stuff in there. So whenever I find the time to write round 2, I will do that. But yeah, it's a short read. Like if you're just interested in really just reading about aerobic fitness and VO2 max, some of the science behind it, people might be interested in that.
I'm curious with your knowledge on the subject, do you coach yourself or does someone else coach you?
Yeah, I just self-coach, and coach might be kind of loose. I mean, I write my own training plans and stuff if it's for a big race, but yeah, I don't have a coach.
Yeah, I figured it seems like you know more than enough about constructing a solid, marathon block to coach yourself. So yeah, figured.
I hope, and I just think that, I don't have a ton of coaching experience, but again, with an exercise and a physiology background, I kind of, know, and I've done some, I have some training in like, here's how to construct a training plan, whether it's resistance or aerobic training. Obviously have less experience from a coaching standpoint compared to somebody like Steve. But I have coached a few people in the past. It's not something that I regularly do just because of like the time. I do enjoy it. It's not my favorite thing though. I'd much prefer to do kind of like the research and the writing that I'm doing now. But yeah, I think being self-coached for me is kind of the best thing because I know exactly what I want to do. I know what workouts I like. I know how I like to structure my training plan. So it's kind of the route that I've gone. There's a couple of great groups here in Austin that I've considered. I'll do long runs with them and stuff, but just haven't made the plunge to hiring a coach or anything, and don't feel like I need to at this point right now.
I was gonna say we have a friend that coaches Bat City Track Club. We can hook you up.
Yeah, Bat City. I'm familiar. I'm friends with a few guys on the team. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we got Jeff coming on for round 2 here in a week, I think. So that'll be fun. High energy guy.
I forgot we have him back on.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a banger. Brady, I'm so curious about VO2 max. I could probably spend a whole podcast on it, but what are the things that you can do to train it? Like just for our listeners, what are in how is it trained? If it is.
Yeah. So you'll see a lot of stuff on social media that zone 2 is the key to improving your VO2 max. And then others saying like, it's just high intensity interval training. I mean, it's just like the discussion to me is kind of, it's all moot because of course, like a well-designed training program, you're going to have easy runs. You're going to have very high intensity runs. You're just going to have, your threshold runs. So like all of those work in combination to help improve your VO2 max. But technically the real answer to like, what's the best way to improve your VO2 max is to run at a high percentage of your VO2 max doing like intervals. So if that's like your sole goal and you're not an athlete doing 20 hours a week of aerobic exercise training, you need to do 80% of that at low intensity, 20% at high intensity. The answer is like spend a lot of time at a high percent of your VO2 max. There was like a recent study that showed basically what correlated very well with improvements of VO2 max was you spend a large amount of time at 90% plus of your VO2 max. So yeah, do your threshold, do your high intensity intervals, and that's going to be the best way to improve it. That other stuff, yeah, zone 2 training, that can be thought of as like the support stuff. It supports your aerobic base. That's what we call it, base training. You obviously need all of that stuff. You can't just do high intensity interval training. But if somebody were to come to me and say like, hey, I have 93 days per week of 90 minutes, and my only concern is just getting my VO2 max as high as possible, I'd probably have them do intervals all 3 of those days, because they're only doing, and I say only, but they're only doing 90 minutes a week. That's not a lot. Most people are doing, runners like us are doing 90 minutes or more every single day. So there's obviously context, but yeah, higher intensity training, that's the best way to improve it.
Is that something that you focus on a lot during your marathon builds?
It is. So I try to be careful with it, because obviously the more high intensity training you do, you run the risk of injury, you run the risk of quote unquote burnout or overtraining. Those are pretty not well defined terms, but that was something that was different for me. Indy versus kind of the first marathon that I did in the spring. I really tried to focus on doing pretty much one interval workout every week, and then I would say twice a month I would do a workout during like my marathon long run, something like marathon pace stuff or close to it. Every week I try to do something, and sometimes that's not like a formal speed workout. Sometimes it's just I'm going to do surges, like quarter-mile surges during a run or something like that, but something that gets my heart rate elevated. But yeah, that was a major focus for me during the block, and I think that was one of the things that helped contribute to the result, in addition to doing more mileage. But really just focusing on like running that marathon pace or slightly faster, kind of how I prefer to do it, was really the key.
Yeah, and I was looking at your Strava, and I was struck by your mileage. It wasn't as high as I expected it to be. Like, what kind of mileage were you running during the Indy build, and why?
Yeah, I think probably the lowest was 55 and the highest was 70. So I kind of fell within that range. I would say if it was a down week, I would be 55, but 60 to 70. I never surpassed 70 miles during that build. I think I had 1 week of 70 miles. The rest were, sandwiching that were kind of like 65 to 68. And then I would have some like mid to low 60s for the rest of the stuff. So, a lot less than, oh, is that my Strava? Nice.
just gave you the follow.
Awesome. I'll follow you back after this. I don't have my phone with me. Sorry. So I did that on, I think the key here is, so I ran, I was doing 65, 70 miles a week. That was on 4 days of running every single week. I never ran more than 4 days in any week.
What?
So pretty much you're averaging, 15 to 20 miles every time I do run. And it's a unique approach, but for me, it was just something, again, all of my training blocks are kind of like experimental. I've suffered a lot in the past from bone stress injuries. So if I try to increase my mileage too much, stress injuries, stress reaction, stress fracture, that's kind of the only injuries that I've struggled with. So I've kind of had to reiterate my training every single block to like, how can I kind of get to the mileage I want without getting injured? And one of that was just to say, okay, well, if I want to run the same mileage, what if I do it on less days per week? So basically, I never run more than 2 days in a row. I always do either 2 run days and I follow that with a day on the bike. Some days I just run 1 day in a row and then I'll bike and then run again. So never run more than 3 days in a row, never 4 days or more than 4 days in a week. What that does for me, I think, is allow me that recovery day where I'm just kind of no impact day. I'm riding the bike for like 2 hours, basically, like my indoor trainer. And it has seemed to work. I mean, it's the first time in a while that I was able to even run 70 miles a week without injury. So that's kind of my reasoning behind it. It's definitely a little unorthodox, just running 4 days a week and cycling 3 days a week, but it got me to a 226. And now kind of what I'm doing is thinking about trying a little bit different, maybe running 5 days a week as I train for Boston in the spring, maybe upping the mileage a little bit more, trying some new things. But I think the high density is what I called it, higher density training days, doing the 15 to 20 miles on the days that I do run. I think that was kind of the only way that was going to let me be prepared for the marathon, just by like building up that leg strength. So of course I could do 7 days a week and do 60 to 70 miles, but that means I'm doing just 10 miles or less on those days. So I really just think like running 15 to 20 miles on the days I did helped me build kind of the leg strength and harden the legs enough that they were able to kind of last for that marathon. Because when I did the 237 in May, I definitely wasn't prepared for that. Again, course was a lot different, but my legs were shot at the end and I had like massive cramping and stuff the last few miles just from like muscle fatigue because I don't think I was that prepared.
Man, that just threw me off because so we just had a guest on, Jake Bearclaw. He's YouTube is ran to Japan, and his story is he moved from England to Japan to train with Japanese marathoners to run 150 plus miles a week. And in a year, he dropped his marathon from like 237 to 217. And
Jeez.
I've been running 100-mile weeks the last few weeks since we had him on. That bad decision. But now I'm torn because you just ran 226, running 4 days a week. Granted, you were running 50 miles a day, 50 miles plus.
Yeah, but like he was also on the trainer, right? On the indoor bike.
Yeah,
and so like how many hours a week do you think you were putting in just like in at least zone 2?
For running or biking combined or
combined?
Yeah, so I mean, I was biking 6 to 7 hours a week, and then you add the running is probably another 7 to 8 hours, at peak. So you're doing 14, 15 hours total. I mean, 12 of that's going to be zone 2. I mean, 3, maybe 2 to 3 of that is like zone 3, zone 4, very little zone 5 stuff. So yeah, a ton. I mean, my volume was so high. I think the biking was primarily aerobic. I did do some speed intervals on the bike, which I think definitely benefited it. You don't get the impact of like a interval workout on the run, but you're still getting your heart rate up there and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think it is important to note that like, the whole Parker Valby approach is like, yeah, oh, she cross trains. Well, yeah, but she cross trains like a freaking animal. So yeah, I'm doing, if you're willing to do 6 to 7 hours a week on like an indoor trainer, that certainly helped, as did the high density running days. But kind of back to what you were saying, Chris, I think again, another thing that's not often discussed when I'm like, oh, I had this success with the 4-day running. Yeah, but I also have this huge running history where, I mean, when I was at NKU, when I was in college, I mean, for those 4 years that I was there, I probably averaged 90 to 110 miles a week, every single week. I never was injured. I was a super high mileage guy. And even after NKU for a couple of years, I was running 100, 110 miles a week, for a year or so. So I used to, I run a ton. And so now when I think about that 60 to 70, it's like, it's not a lot of running compared to what I used to do. And maybe I can build back up to that eventually. I was able to handle it at one point. So I don't see a reason why I can't. But I think I just went through kind of a period where I de-adapted. I don't even know that that's a word, but from that, and I kind of need to build back up to that. But the training history certainly plays a role in that. I don't think most people can, if you're new to running and you want to run 4 days a week, I'm not necessarily sure if you don't have that training history, if it's the best approach, but it was a proof of concept that, you can cross train and run and still run a decent marathon time, just 4 days a week.
I was going to say, you got to be thinking about OTQ now that you run 226, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the goal. I mean, I'm 31. I think by the time the next one comes around, it'll be like right at that, 34, which would be like that's like peak marathon age for males. And you could have a shot at the 2032 maybe Olympics. I don't know. I'll be like 30, 39 then. Why not? Kipchoge does it. Why can't I? Right. So yeah, but that's definitely like on my mind now. And I think that's kind of why I've started to think differently about, okay, well, what can we do for Boston to try to change up training? Can I do more miles? Because I think eventually, and there's no way I get an OTQ just running 4 days a week and biking for 3. I think something's gonna change. I think I could do it probably on 5 days a week maybe, but the mileage is probably gonna have to be 80 to 90. I think, at least in my mind, to kind of get there. So, but that's a process, and that's kind of, I'm playing the long game, because for me right now, it's less about how fast can I run. I want to run fast, but not getting injured is kind of the priority number one. Because if you get to the finish line injured, but in great shape, it's kind of all pointless to me, especially since I'm not getting paid for it. It's all about enjoyment.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously you have job, family, all that stuff too. It's hard to, I don't have any kids yet or anything. And you have a kid, don't you?
Yeah, we have a 19-month-old.
Oh, wow. Nice. Congrats.
Thanks.
I'm a big fan of, I tried out the cross training thing. I got injured in like a year ago now, and that's what introduced me to the elliptical. I elliptical like 8 hours a week and stayed in decent shape. And I ran a
Mhm.
242 in Houston off of like no running. I ran for 4 weeks. And like a couple workouts, but I like went hard. Like I was like, did like stupid stuff. I found like a new max heart rate on the elliptical and stuff. But there's something to be said about it. I feel like my biggest benefit for my last block, I did like 3 to 4 hours on the elliptical a week on top of 70 miles. And I did feel like I got a little burnt out because I would run 6 days a week. And then I like that idea of like running a little more and then just ellipticaling, because I would double. I would run an elliptical
Okay. Mhm.
4 days straight. I would run an elliptical Monday through Thursday. So I'd essentially be in zone 2 or more for 2 to 3 hours Monday through Thursday. And I think it was just a little too much, but I always felt like whenever I had like a little niggle, like something in my calf or something in my hip flexor or something, the cross training would always work it out.
Mhm.
It would always flush it. Like, I don't even know if flush is the right word. We always use that word as a runner, but it I would almost forget about it. I would have like a calf, like I would call it like a light strain, and I would elliptical, and then the next day I'm like, oh, my calf doesn't hurt anymore. There's something to be
I
said
find
about it.
I find the same thing with biking. Like I can like obliterate myself on the bike just like aerobically, but man, I just feel after every bike day, I just feel better. Like my legs feel better. It's almost like I'm recovering and getting better at the same
Yeah.
time. But I think what you said about the burnout thing is kind of important, but like, and that's almost why I think this has worked so well. My training has worked so well for me, like psychologically, because I'm only running 4 days a week. So again, I run 2 days in a row maximum, so I'm never running more than 3 days in a row, but I'm also never really biking more than 2 days in a row. So it keeps things fresh, and just mentally I'm like, I'm excited for every single run because I'm only running 4 days a week. Like on that day that I cycle, I'm like, okay, I enjoy it, but I'm like, thank God that's done. I'm so glad I get to run tomorrow. And then when I finish
It
one of my run
sucks.
days, I'm like, God damn it, I have to ride that bike for 2 hours tomorrow. But it's not so bad. You can watch movies and stuff, and like I've actually grown to
Yeah.
love the indoor trainer a little bit. But yeah, I think if I did both every day and just said and split it up, so I'm going to ride the bike for an hour and run for an hour and do that every day, I think that would not produce I think it would cause kind of a little bit of burnout, like you were kind of saying, versus I'm going to ride for 2 hours today, no running, and then tomorrow I'm going to run for 2 hours. I just like doing a lot when I run versus, and I almost think that's why the 4 day approach has worked for me. Sorry, something just like popped up on my screen.
All good.
Hold on. Something's playing in my background. 1 second. I don't know what just popped up. What is
We
going
can't
on
hear it.
here? You can't hear it?
No.
I can. It's like messing me up. 1 second. Sorry guys.
That happens to me on work phone calls all the time. I'll like a song will play in my headphones while the client's talking.
Really?
Yeah, dude, like I'll accidentally hit play on a song. It'll really mess with you.
Yeah, that's happened to me too.
Okay. My music like app opened and it started playing a podcast. So sorry about that.
Were you listening to the Life and Stride podcast?
I was. How meta. So yeah, just like doing the 4 days, it did just allow me to really look forward to the days I was running, really like not kind of feel afraid to push a little bit more on those days too, where you're like, hey, you're only running 4 days a week. I'm not really afraid to up it and go into like maybe drift into zone 3 or something like that, which wasn't hard this summer during the heat. Like my heart rate was, wild just on like a zone 2 run. But the biking essentially has just replaced, like, instead of a hour and a half easy run, it's basically just a bike. It's kind of like filled those gaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the same wavelength, but I like your method better.
Yeah, I would try that. Out because I do some days where I'll bike and then run on the same day, maybe like once per week. But and there were some, I went through a point where I was doing that every day, but I didn't like doing that as much.
Would you double, or do you do it all at once?
If it was the bike
For
and the
running.
run. For run, I doubled once per week, like during this training block, and I would do it on my workout day. So again, that day would be like, I basically had 2 days every week where I was doing 20 miles. I would do the workout day, so like 14, 15 in the morning, 5 to 6 at night, and then I'd have my long run day where it would be like 20 plus miles. So yeah, I double 1 day per week, and then I'd sometimes have a day where I'd bike and run, so to get another like 2 hours of kind of zone 2-ish work. Usually, I don't know, I kind of flip it up, bike before the run sometimes. You really feel good running after the bike because you're like warmed up.
100%.
Yeah.
Dude, my brain is churning.
Yeah, mine is too.
We're
Questioning
thanking.
everything.
We're thanking over here, brother.
I wanna have like a full on like Joe Rogan pod with you. Like I just feel like we could talk about like so many different like running things I have questions on. Just a full on 3 hour
That'd be fun. We could
Joe
do
Rogan banger.
like a protect our parks, but for endurance running.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
just get really stoned.
Dude, it would be like 6 hours long.
He just had them on.
That'd be
Like
a blast, actually.
yeah, he just had them on one of his last episodes, I think.
Yeah.
I have had a couple beers on one of these podcasts before, and I will say it makes it quite enjoyable.
Nice.
I'd have one if it weren't so late. If we were doing this at like 2 p.m. maybe.
I dig it.
Nice. All right, Danny P. You want to hit him with the billboard, bro?
Oh yeah, we got to do the billboard question, and Brady would have a good answer for this. This is a question that I have totally ripped from the Tim Ferriss podcast, but every time I ask it, I get really good answers. So I'm going to ask you, Brady, if you had a billboard in downtown Austin, Texas, or maybe Times Square, New York, that is your message to the world that you need everyone to see, could be an image, a tweet, a quote. What do you put on Brady's billboard?
Yeah, I think what I would put on it is nobody really cares that much. And why I say that is because I think, we all like to take ourselves very seriously, and especially with like what I'll call, us amateur runners. I hope that's not insulting to any of you, but I consider myself a higher level amateur runner, but I'm still a recreational athlete. And I think a lot of the times we can kind of put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Oh, well, I'm running Indy, and, I've been posting about this on X, and I need to run this good time. So I kind of like prove to everybody that I can run fast. And, taking my since we're talking about running, I'll just kind of keep it to like running and athletics. But like, I just think a lot of the times, we're thinking, oh, everybody's watching us. Everybody's looking at our Strava. And, when you get injured, everybody's like, oh, where'd Brady go? Why is he not running? In reality, I just think, obviously people are interested in what I'm doing, when I'm posting my things on running on X and posting all of my training. But in reality, if I don't run well, nobody really cares that much. Even, my wife, she wants to see me run well, but she doesn't really care if I run a 2:30 or a 2:26. I mean, it's not,
That
so
hits.
yeah. So I just think that, yeah, we do this for fun. It's a hobby. Sure. That doesn't mean we can't take it seriously. I mean, running is, one of the big 3 or 4 things like that I actually care about in my life. So I take it seriously and want to do well. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, I care about it, but it doesn't really determine how other people kind of think about me, or at least I hope it doesn't. But yeah, nobody really is paying that close of attention, or at least as close of attention as you think they are.
So true. And that goes beyond running. I know you kept it like running focused because this is a running podcast, but you're living it, man. You're an author. You create a ton of stuff and put your words out there for scrutiny and share your journey in your running. And it is a deeply personal thing. And I think people respect that a lot, that you're sharing it with them in public so they can hopefully draw some inspiration, education from it. So we appreciate your work, man. And we appreciate you coming on the pod.
No, thanks for having me. I think this was awesome. All the questions were great. It was super fun, but also hopefully super informative to listeners. And yeah, I'd like to come on anytime if you have like topics you want to discuss, like
I had
science-related
5 more
running
topics
stuff. I mean,
easily, but I had 5 more topics easily, but
Well, we're gonna go for 4 hours.
we're running short on time.
Yeah,
and
I know.
and
Well, it's
honestly,
funny,
I'm going to get you
before-
scheduled right after we hang up. I'm going to get you scheduled for part 2. So
I want to
Yeah.
do for part 2. I want to do genetics and running for sure, and
yeah,
fueling strategies, and race body weight. He has in here, dude. That's like 3 hours right there.
Yeah, man, the whole weight topic's an interesting one. Yeah,
I
that
got
could be
time. Let's
good.
just hit it. I got time.
Yeah, sure.
All right,
me
we'll
too.
go over weight, and then we'll schedule round 2.
Okay.
I got nowhere to be. I think everybody's in bed in my house at this point. So
Yeah, so there's a common, I guess, like running lore, you might call it, or like a rule of thumb where it's for every pound you lose in weight is a minute off your marathon time. Have you heard that before? That's something
Yeah.
that like my kind of older marathoner friends like to say. How much truth do you think there is to that?
yeah, I don't know if I've heard it in the same regard as like it's every pound is a minute off your marathon time or something, but I've heard it as like every pound you're going to average like 5 seconds per mile slower or something like that, which maybe I guess that equates to almost a minute, I guess, off your marathon time or maybe more. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously some truth to it. I mean, running, cycling, other things like that, they're weight conscious sports. I mean, that's why you don't see super heavy people, winning, because your ability to generate power is better. If you generate the same power, you're lighter weight, you're gonna run faster and be able to, be more efficient. So there's obviously some truth to that, but like everything, there's kind of like a U shape. If you're way too heavy, you're going to be slow. If you're way too light, you're going to sacrifice your power output. You're going to sacrifice your strength. You're going to increase your injury risk. So finding that, quote unquote race weight, I guess, which I would define as, it's the weight where everything kind of comes together. You're not injured. You're kind of at your strongest and you're going to run your fastest. I don't know if everybody has we can all say like we have a specific weight weight, or like, when you ran your PR, like how much did you weigh or where do you feel you're fastest at? I think we could all kind of intuitively say like, I feel best at this weight. Maybe it's where I feel I look the best, but when I'm running, I feel kind of like the lightest. So there's certainly truth to it. If you gain a few pounds, you're probably going to run slower, unless it's all muscle and you have weight to gain. And if you lose a little bit and you have a little bit of weight to lose, you're going to run faster. So for me and for most runners, I think the problem isn't being too heavy. It's, trying to get down to that race weight and evading injury when you kind of get down to that. That's certainly been kind of my problem in the past, and not necessarily trying consciously to get down to that race weight, but just, not paying enough attention to how much you're eating. And when you're running 100 plus miles a week, it's impossible to keep weight on. So you're just going to like run the risk of injury. And so I think for me, something I've struggled with in the past is, being a little bit too on the lighter side, and your injury risk is up. So like gain some weight and you'll probably, experience less injuries. And that's kind of been my experience, at least as of lately. So there's certainly truth to race weight. And I just think that, again, for people who aren't professional athletes, I think how I like to think about it now, and I've chatted with a few people on social media and stuff about this, is just kind of err on the side of being a little bit heavier. What do maybe you're going to run a little bit slower, but if you are potentially, 30 to 45 seconds slower in the marathon, but you're injury free, your hormones aren't kind of like all out of whack, you have some vitality, you have some strength. I think for me, that's better than, you're, just kind of lethargic all day because you're at this like race weight that's not sustainable and you're running a minute faster for what? Just to say you ran a minute faster. Okay. Of course. Well, if it's a, 218 versus a 217.58, then maybe I'm going to like try to get that extra pound off, I guess, for the Olympic trials qualifier. But until then, a 226.28 versus a 225.30, obviously you can just train a little bit harder and not necessarily try to get there through weight. So I think if you're really trying to optimize, back to this idea of like human performance, it's like, yeah, I want to run fast, but you also have to like be able to do everything else in life. Like you have to be able to be there, like support your family, just be strong. You want to feel good. And that tends to be better, if you err on the side of, being a little bit over versus a little bit under. That's kind of that's been my framework for the last few years, at least.
One of the last things you said was like being able to like function like with your family and stuff. That's a lot of the people that listen to this podcast have kids. Mm-hmm. We had a host that started the podcast with us. His name was Cheston. He just recently stepped off because of family. He had a fourth kid and it's just too much. But that's definitely like one of my, whenever I tell people about running, that like knew me before running, I started running about 3 years ago. Like I say the biggest con is like Saturdays, like the Saturday long run, I'll do 20 miles with a workout in there and I'm cooked. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes I'm so cooked that like I can't get off the couch, and like no amount of caffeine will bring you back. It's just like you're done. And then like you got a parent, I have 3 kids, and I'm just like, that's my biggest downfall. So you're definitely weighing that, like especially if you get light, you're weighing the like your recovery and being able to function. So
no, totally. You can't really, unless you have a very, very supportive spouse, which I do, but she's not going to let me lay around on the couch all day when we have a child to care for. So you can't come back from your long run and say, okay, well, I have to eat breakfast and I have to lay on the couch for an hour in my Normatec boots and then we can get going. No, I get back from my long run. I gotta like, chug down my smoothie, and then we're going to like go out for the day because the kid wants to get out, she wants to get out of the house. So you kind of have to like, and it's kind of been the fun thing. It's difficult to balance all the things, but it's fun, and that's why like I think I tried to embody like the human performance thing. It's like, yeah, you're running fast, but like, what else can you do to like kick ass in life and like do all these things on top of that? That's a lot of fun as well, because like, yeah, you're not a pro athlete. You might want to train like one, which is fine, but you also have to find ways. And that's where like supplements and like all the biohacking stuff comes in. It's like, how can I do all of this stuff, work the full-time job, train like a professional athlete, be a parent, and like still like function. So it's kind of fun to be able to do that. Not to say that it isn't incredibly difficult at times, but yeah, you don't get that luxury of the Saturday long run. Just okay, time to watch football all day. It's all right. Now it's time to do your actual job when you get home.
The similarities between like being fit and with your real life are fun though, because like I'll serve in kids at my church, and I have the second and third graders. They're like 9, and we'll go on the playground for I don't know 20 minutes, and I'll race them. I'll have 20 10-year-olds chasing me in this little rectangle. It's all fenced in, and the other people who serve with me are like, why are you doing this and how are you doing this? I'll run like sprints and like cut, and I actually like pulled my adductor for like a week. Like it hurt for a week because I'll run in like Chelsea boots, jeans, and like a flannel, and I'm sweating by the end of it. And it's fun. I mean, they're like, the other parents are like, I don't know how you do that, but my kids always talk about when Scotty's in church because I'm just like ripping.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I was having this discussion on like X today because I had posted something and people were like talking about, it was like something about parenting and like you have all the energy to parent, like with all the running you do. I'm like, that's the kind of the paradox of it. It's like, it's not the people who don't do their Saturday mile long run that's 20 miles who don't have all the energy. It's the people who do it. Like you have more energy because you're like working out. Like, I don't know, you're a better parent because you're fit and you're healthy. It's like, I don't know.
Unless it's on workout days, like Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Especially, I mean, if it's like the summer and you do a workout or a long run or something, you're like, okay, it's a zombie day. I'm sorry. We're going to have to like stay inside. But yeah, I mean, you tend to just feel better and actually have more energy. So it's like you're running and you're fit and you're able to like have more energy than the parents who aren't doing the stuff. It doesn't tend to be the opposite. So
100%.
Yeah. Love that. That's a great place to wrap, boys. Brady, thanks for sticking on a few more minutes to talk bodyweight with us. So
heck yeah.
Yeah, let's get them back on, boys. Definitely.
I'd love
some more things to talk about.
So many things.
All right, episode 93, everybody. Brady Holmer. Brady will drop your socials in the show notes. People give him a follow. We'll put Strava X. You on Instagram too?
I'm on there. I don't really post too much, so
okay. We'll do the
people
Strava
shouldn't bother
X.
following me on there. But yeah.
All right.
7 episodes till hundo. We're almost there.
Yeah, 7 episodes till hundo. All right.
I quit at 100.
Yeah, we're never potting again at 100. All right. Peace, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.